When I was 18, I got my first real job. I was fresh out of high school and far too broke to care what it actually was. It definitely wasn't glamorous or anything. It was this big retail box chain with flickering lights and ugly blue polos, and of course, customers that always looked vaguely pissed off. But it paid more than fast food did, and it had air conditioning, so I figured I'll ride it out until I find something better. And honestly, I didn't mind it. I didn't have to think too hard. Management liked me because I showed up on time and didn't complain, and I got along with pretty much everybody. I did a little bit of everything: floor recovery, stocking, customer service when they were desperate. About a month in, one of the assistant managers pulled me aside, offered me an overnight shift, said they were short-staffed on nights and thought I could handle it. It came with a small bump in my pay and more hours, so I said yes without really thinking. I didn't have anything else going on anyway. The night crew was this skeleton team, just enough to unload the trucks and get the shelves restocked before the morning. There was Ernie, a crusty old guy who'd been there forever. He was friendly enough, but always had this weird twinkle in his eye, like he knew something that you didn't. Then there were Scott and Felix from cleaning, who mostly kept to themselves unless they were roasting one another. And Amy, the shift supervisor. She was the no-nonsense type, walked around with a clipboard like it meant something, but she was cool to me, so. I remember thinking, alright, this'll be pretty chill. No customers, decent people, easy work. But that first week, they all warned me about it. Whatever it was that came out when the store got quiet. I laughed it off, but I really wish I hadn't. The first night they brought it up, we were restocking the pet aisle. I was cutting open a box of dog food when Ernie shuffled over with his pallet jack and said, "You see anything weird yet?" I glanced up. "Weird? What do you mean?" He smirked. "Things moving, stuff going missing, lights flickering in sections that we ain't touched yet." Scott popped his head around the corner grinning at me. "Tell him about the freezer door." "Oh yeah," Ernie nodded. "Last month, walked past the frozen section and saw the back door wide open, cold pouring, big no-no. Went to shut it and heard somebody breathing off in the dark. Not talking, breathing. So I slammed it and booked it back." They laughed. It felt like this tradition, like telling the new guy about the ghost stories, so I played along. "Damn, maybe it's haunted by frozen pizzas." Amy didn't laugh. She looked at Ernie and then at me. "Just keep your head on a swivel. Weird shit does happen. Don't try to explain it, just let somebody know." I just chalked it up to boredom. Night shift would do things to your brain. The silence, the humming lights, the echo of your own footsteps. And for a while, I personally didn't see anything. Nothing strange. Just overstocked shelves and dusty stockroom corners. But eventually, it started. It was super small at first. I'd set a stack of bleach bottles at the end of an aisle, walk away to grab the next pallet, and when I come back, 2 would be missing. I figured maybe Felix moved them while I was cleaning, messing with me or something. But I found one in the toy section and another in the garden center, just sitting there, like somebody carried it across the store and just set it down. Another night, I was moving back stock into the pharmacy, and I swear to God, I passed this end cap that was fully stocked, turned around maybe a minute later, and half the shelves were bare. Nobody else was in the aisle. No noises, no nothing. I started watching others more closely. Ernie seemed like the type to screw around. He had that mischievous old man energy and loved telling stories. I figured he had to be pranking me, trying to keep this whole tradition alive. So I made it a point to stick close to him for a few nights, but every time something weird happened, he was nowhere near the scene. One night when I was working in the seasonal section, I heard a door slam near the loading dock. I called out thinking it was Scott or Felix, but no answer. I walked back and found the door to the electrical room cracked open, and that door was always locked. I didn't go in. Things began to escalate from there though. I'd find aisles lit up for no reason, inventory carts that I never touched now moved 20 feet away. Even Amy started to look pretty unsettled. She stopped brushing it off and stopped trying to make it funny. That's when I decided to just take matters into my own hands. On my day off, I went in around noon, told one of the assistant managers that I was trying to familiarize myself with the security protocols. Didn't even blink, just showed me how to access the camera system in the back office. I spent about 30 minutes learning controls, learning to rewind footage, switch angles, all I needed to know. So the next night, I came in early, normal shift, same crew, and I acted like everything was fine. I was assigned to the home goods section, working through a pile of bed sheets and bath towels. I placed a full display of towels on a folding table and went to grab the next stack. When I came back, table was empty. Not one towel on the ground, just gone. That was it. I booked it to the security room, heart hammering in my chest. It felt stupid, but also felt like the most important thing I'd ever done. I sat down at the terminal, rewound the footage, clicked to the timestamp just a few minutes ago, and hit play. I watched myself stack the towels, then leave. And then that's when I saw him. He came from the left side of the frame, ducking low. An old man in this dusty brown coat, face obscured by the grain of the camera. He crept toward the table, picked up one towel at a time, and then carried them off screen. His movements were smooth, like he knew nobody was going to catch him. He didn't look around, he didn't hesitate. He came back again and again and again and took every last towel, then walked calmly into the employees-only corridor. I paused the tape, rewound it, and watched it again. He wasn't wearing a uniform, he wasn't anybody I'd ever seen before. He had this hunchback and long stringy white hair, and he walked with a limp like something was wrong with his right foot. But the thing that stuck with me the most, the thing that I'll never forget, was how calm this guy looked. This man was at peace. I called Amy. She came in, watched the footage with me, and I saw all the color drain from her face. "That's the same guy," she muttered. "I swear that's the same guy I saw 2 weeks ago walking into the garden center." "Who the hell is he?" I asked her. She didn't answer, just grabbed the phone and called the cops. The police showed up around 3 a.m., 2 cruisers with their lights off, like they were responding to a bomb threat instead of a trespasser. Amy met them in the vestibule, brought them to the office where I played the footage again for them. The older of the 2 officers leaned in close, watching the grainy figure shuffle across the screen. His face never showed, just that limp, that coat, and those same repeated movements. "Jesus," the younger cop whispered. "How long has this been going on?" "We don't know," Amy said. Her voice was tight. "We've noticed things missing, thought maybe it was somebody just messing with us." "Anybody ever see this guy in person?" "No," I said. "Not until now." "I actually think I did, last week," Amy confessed. They spent the next 3 hours combing the building, every corner, every aisle. They opened every emergency exit, went up into the catwalks near the back of the warehouse. Nothing though, not a footprint, not a blanket or a can of food or hidden stashes. They even brought in a canine, and the dog just sniffed around without reacting to much. Nobody could figure it out. The store was locked up tight every night at 11 p.m., and we were the only ones inside. No sign of forced entry, no signs of squatting. It was like the guy appeared when the lights went dim, did his little routine, and would vanish soon after. When morning came, they took our statements. They told us to keep an eye out and took off. That was that. No answers, no follow-up. Just this tight-lipped goodbye and call us if he shows up again. The next few shifts were kind of stiff and everybody was feeling it. Amy doubled our walkthroughs, Scott and Felix stopped cracking jokes. Ernie kept rubbing his jaw and muttering things to himself. Nobody was saying it out loud, but we were all waiting to see him again, waiting for the towels to vanish, waiting for the doors to swing open on their own. But nothing happened, not for a week, not for a month, and the weirdness seemed to stop cold. And for some reason, that was almost worse. You know that feeling when somebody's staring at you but you can't prove it? That's what it felt like. Every single aisle felt like it had eyes of its own. Every flicker of the lights would make my pulse jump. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps when I knew I was alone in a section, just faint enough to pass for imagination though. Ernie quit 2 weeks later. He said he needed cleaner work, didn't leave a number, didn't say goodbye to anybody. Amy actually stopped working nights long after that too, switched to midday shift and kept her head down. As for me, I stuck around for another couple of months, mostly because I needed the money, but I stopped going in alone. I made sure I was always with somebody, even if it meant pretending to need help with something that I'd done 100 times before. I'd like to say it made me braver, but really I just got better at acting like I wasn't terrified. Eventually I did move on, got another job, something a lot more normal, something with windows and natural light, but I still think about that guy. And every now and again, I'll drive past that store. It's still there, still lit up at night like a glowing box full of its secrets. I wonder if he's still inside, and I wonder if he ever really left. Maybe he was never homeless, maybe he was never real, maybe we were just part of something that nobody could really explain. To my knowledge, nobody was caught, no updates were given, no arrests, just a shadow on a grainy screen moving throughout the aisles. For about 8 years, it was just me and the kids. No help from their dad, no real backup plan for my family. Just side gigs, sleepless nights, and a long stretch of wondering if I'd ever get to take a breath without calculating what was left in the fridge. I cleaned houses, did overnights at the gas station, stocked shelves at 2 different stores, picked up whatever I could in between. It wasn't about pride, it was about rent, groceries, and school shoes. One of the very last jobs that I picked up during that stretch was this cleaning position at a big glass-paneled office building just outside the city. 7 stories, slick lobby, always smelled like printer ink and lemon polish. It looked way more expensive than anything I'd ever worked in, but the job itself wasn't bad. I was on nights, which was my preference. Kids were asleep. I could trust the oldest with them. I could move through the place in peace. Each floor belonged to a different company, and my job was to make the rounds after everybody cleared out. Take the trash out, desktops wiped down, toilets cleaned. I brought my own headphones and moved pretty quickly. The sooner I'd finish, the sooner I could crash for 4 hours before making lunches and the school drop-off. The first 6 floors were active, the 7th floor was vacant, which basically just meant that it hadn't been leased out in a very long time. The elevator was still there, but the button was dead, locked out unless you had a key access card. Management said not to worry about it. My pass didn't even work for it, so I didn't give it much more thought. Now the job was boring, painfully boring, the worst kind of repetitive. There's only so many trash cans and urinals you can clean before you start running on autopilot. But the pay was decent, and there wasn't a soul to bother me after 9 p.m. So for the first 2 months, it was just that. Quiet, predictable, forgettable. Then one night I heard something coming up from the floor above me. Not a bump or a creak, not like a building settling. It sounded like people working and talking. I remember standing there with a full trash bag in one hand just listening, trying to figure out who the hell had moved up to the top floor and why nobody had said anything to me. The second time I heard a noise from the 7th floor, I stood there frozen in the 6th floor break room, holding a trash bag and listening again. Above me, I could clearly hear the thud of somebody walking, the rustle of papers and typing. I tilted my head up toward the ceiling, listening harder. It wasn't just one person, it was a whole floor of activity. Phones ringing, muffled voices, drawers sliding open and shut. It was 1:30 in the morning. I stood there like an idiot for a full 5 minutes, staring up at the ceiling, waiting for it to stop, but it didn't. The noise just faded gradually into the silence. I almost convinced myself that I imagined the whole thing until somebody started repeating the same sentence over and over. Now I couldn't quite make it out from the cadence though, it was unmistakable, monotone, robotic, like somebody reading a line of code from memory, and it went on for hours and hours. So the next morning I asked Frank. "Nobody's leased the 7th floor, he said, not even looking up from his computer. "If they had, we'd be the first to know. We'd have to clean it." "Okay, so who's working up there at night?" He squinted at me. "You hear something?" I hesitated. "Yeah, just curious though." He narrowed his eyes at me but didn't press. "There's nobody up there. Just leave it alone." So I left it alone. But that night, I started paying a little closer attention. Every time I got near the stairwell or the vents, I'd stop and listen. Most nights were quiet, but every few days the sounds would return. Not always the same though either. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like a full-blown staff meeting. Other times it was one person crying. Once, I even heard the elevator ding twice in a row and a voice shout, "Welcome back, Mr. Anders." No one was up there though. Frank swore by it, so what the hell was I hearing? I started recording it, pulled my phone out and set it to voice memo whenever I passed by the 6th floor east corridor where the vents seemed to carry the most sound. I caught it all. Conversations about project deadlines, people typing furiously, somebody whispering that they were lost and cold. But when I played it back, nothing. Just the soft shuffle of my sneakers and a whole lot of dead air. The recordings were there, but the voices were gone. At one point, I started thinking maybe there was a speaker system that I didn't know about. Maybe some bored tech guy had hooked up a loop to mess with me. But it didn't explain how specific it all sounded. One voice talked about not being able to feel her legs. Another begged for a flashlight. Then one night I swore I heard a little girl humming. Eventually it got to me. I stopped wearing headphones while I cleaned. I avoided the 6th floor towards the end of the shift, but still, 3 to 4 nights a week, I'd hear them. Banging, dragging, phones ringing. One time I could swear somebody ran full speed across the entire 7th floor. It shook the ceiling tiles over me. They were screaming about being lost. It bothered me so much that I started dreaming about it, waking up in cold sweats thinking that I heard the elevator ding from my bedroom. There were days where I felt physically sick going in, like my body knew something that my brain wouldn't accept. Then just after 2 a.m. one night, right as I was finishing the 4th floor, I'd taken the stairs because I didn't want to hear the elevator again. But as I came around the corner near the lobby elevator bank, I heard the ding and saw the door slide open. A man stepped out. He was sharply dressed, charcoal suit, dark tie, black briefcase. He looked like a lawyer or a banker. He didn't even glance at me, just calmly walked past and stepped into the next elevator. I quietly followed, staying far enough back not to make any noises. He pressed a button. The elevator responded. Floor 7 lit up red. I stood there stunned. It shouldn't have worked. That button was dead. Frank said the floor was locked, but the elevator accepted it like it was business as usual. The doors closed before I could do anything else. I stood there in the lobby for a long time after that, 10 minutes or more, watching the elevator panel above the door. It didn't come back down. Nobody came back down. That's when I started thinking about it differently, not like a haunted floor or a practical joke, but something worse, something behind the 7th floor, behind the elevator panel, behind the drywall and empty badge logs. Something that didn't belong in an office building but still showed up anyway. Something the shell of what that floor used to do, but what exactly? I didn't know. I just knew it was happening at night, always when nobody was there to see it but me. And that's when I decided I've had enough. No more guessing, no more asking Frank and getting blank stares. The following week, I came in with a plan. If I saw somebody go up again, I'd follow. If not, I'd find a way to access the elevator panel myself. I was done playing dumb, done acting like this was just noise in the pipes. It didn't take long either. On a Thursday night, I saw him again. The same man, same suit, same blank face. He stepped out of one elevator and walked straight into the other side, pressed a button and disappeared behind those closing silver doors. This time though, I was ready. I waited 2 minutes, just long enough to be sure that he wouldn't be standing right inside, then swiped my badge against the locked panel. It beeped. The red light next to floor 7 came on. The elevator shook a little, then started rising. No music, no lights, just a dim hum rising up into the dark. When the doors opened, I expected to see anything. An office, desk, a lit hallway, I don't know. Anything but what was actually there. It was pitch black. The smell hit me first, mildew and dust and something else. Something sweet and rotten like spoiled lunch meat. I stepped forward into the dark and raised my phone for light. It was a ruin. No carpet, the drywall was cracked open in places, wires dangling from exposed switch boxes. Ceiling panels were missing entirely. A couple of broken office chairs were piled up against the wall like garbage. The silence was total. I whispered, "Hello?" just to break it, and I obviously got nothing back. I turned to leave, already regretting it all, when something shifted out in the dark. A footstep, heavy, just far enough away to make me question it. Then another. I hit the elevator button so hard that my finger bent backward. A voice murmured something behind me, words that I couldn't understand, like a foreign language or maybe just gibberish. The elevator doors opened up and I backed in fast. As they began to close, a deep static roar erupted from somewhere down the hallway, like a television turning on full blast. I saw a flicker of light through the busted door, and something moved. I hit the close door button again, even though it was already closing, and I didn't take a breath until the elevator hit the lobby. After that, I stopped working the 6th floor last. I did it early and never got near those vents again. Frank didn't ask me why. I think he saw something on my face, or maybe he'd heard it too and just didn't want to admit it. Over the next few months, I kept cleaning and kept my head down, but now and again, I'd see somebody, usually around 2 a.m., ride that elevator up to 7. I never asked what they were doing either, because that is well above my pay grade. I spent years working for this tow yard. Not exactly great work, but if you wanted solid money, there was no better racket in town. The pay was actually impressive enough to almost make up for everything else. The brutal hours, the no benefits, and the labor that left your bones aching by sunrise. It wasn't the kind of job where you punched a clock, cracked jokes in the break room, and counted down days until retirement. No, it was cold metal, chains and winches, and accidents that left behind twisted wrecks and shattered glass. Mistakes cost dearly, and a lapse in attention could mean losing fingers, toes, or worse. The work was ruthless and unforgiving, but there was never any shortage of it. That endless demand is why I started working overnights. The job was risky enough during the daylight, but darkness amplified every danger tenfold. People drive differently at night, drunk, distracted, or just plain exhausted, and the calls after midnight pay double, sometimes triple depending on the distance and complexity. For 6 months, I embraced that vampire lifestyle, living off gas station coffee and adrenaline, cruising through sleepy towns lit only by streetlights and the dim glow of the all-night diners. Most of the calls that I went to were routine enough: a stalled engine, a fender bender abandoned on the shoulder, an SUV stuck in a ditch because somebody nodded off behind the wheel. But every now and again, I'd pull something tragic, something that would stay with me longer than I'd like to admit. But it came with the territory, and after a while you either hardened up or just quit the job. I hardened up, mostly, convinced myself that the paycheck was worth whatever the damage the job was doing to my psyche. I just finished a straightforward winch out, pulling a sedan out from this muddy embankment around midnight when I got a call back to the yard. I was thinking about a cup of coffee, maybe a sandwich, when dispatch buzzed me again.
"Got one more for you,"
came the familiar voice, that monotone crackle from the radio.
"Abandoned commercial van off Highway 19, about 40 miles out, near that old pullout that everybody uses."
I sighed to myself but didn't argue, scribbled down the details, half listening as the dispatcher rattled off the make and model. Routine and straightforward, just another vehicle left by some forgetful driver. At least that's what I thought at the time. If I'd known then what I'd find out there in the dark, I would have clocked out and gone straight home. By the time I hit Highway 19, the clock on my dash read 2:30 a.m. The road was stretching ahead of me, lonely and quiet, cutting a thin ribbon through the dense woods, an open field swallowed up by the darkness. The occasional glow from distant farmhouses vanished as I pushed deeper into the night, headlights painting the asphalt in a pale yellow beam. It was definitely one of those routes you don't want to drive alone, let alone at this hour, but the job didn't offer the luxury of choosing your territory. The pullout came into view, just a narrow gravel shoulder where folks sometimes stopped to stretch their legs or inspect their tires. Dispatch said the van would be right there, but as I slowed down and scanned the shadowy turnout, there was nothing there at all, just empty gravel and a scattering of windblown trash. I muttered a curse under my breath, squinting off into the gloom. Dispatch wasn't usually off by much, but maybe the caller had given bad directions or something. I rolled past slowly, shining my spotlight into the surrounding brush. Nothing there though, so I keyed my mic. "Dispatch, there's no vehicle at the reported location. You sure about those directions?" Static cracked briefly before the call voice came back to me, sounding bored and tired.
"Caller was clear. Keep looking. Maybe it's further off down the road."
I sighed again and shook my head, and pushed forward another 10 miles. Just as I started to consider turning back, the beams of my headlights washed over a pale, boxy shape, parked neatly on the side of the road. I slowed to a crawl, taking in the vehicle, a pristine white Sprinter van with commercial logos plastered neatly along the sides. No visible damage. It looked brand new, not something you would expect somebody to abandon on a desolate road. I parked behind it, flipped on the hazards, and stepped out, the night's chill immediately gripping me. As I approached the van, something immediately felt off, almost like the van was waiting, quiet and patiently. I reached for the driver's side door handle, unlocked. I swung the door open silently, revealing a spotless interior, no keys in the ignition. Odd. Usually people leave cars behind because they aren't running, so theft is a non-issue. Usually people leave cars behind because they aren't running, so theft is a non-issue. Those that request a tow typically leave the keys somewhere obvious. I scanned the cab with my flashlight, expecting some kind of clue left behind it. Nope, anything. My heart kicked against my ribs when the beam caught something on the passenger seat. 2 crumpled up shirts, both smeared heavily with dark stains. Blood. My pulse quickened. What the fuck? Digging deeper, I found some other unsettling items scattered across the floorboard. A tiny pair of kids' socks, muddy and torn, a half-open bag of candy, another small electronic device. I stood up with my pulse hammering, skin prickling beneath my jacket. None of this made sense. This wasn't just an abandoned van. Something darker and more sinister had happened here. Determined to finish the job though and get away from this eerie scene, I searched quickly for the keys, and finally in the glove box, my trembling fingers closed around some cold metal. I hesitated briefly, then pushed the key into the ignition and twisted. The engine purred, instantly to life, smooth and healthy. I sat back, breathing hard, hairs rising up on my neck. If the vehicle was operational, why just abandon it here? Maybe it was a tire issue, I don't know. So I grabbed a pressure gauge from my truck and walked around, methodically checking each and every tire. All perfectly fine, full of air. No reason whatsoever for this van to be here, empty and abandoned, with blood-stained clothes inside. Frustrated, I went back to the van, rifling through paperwork scattered inside the glove box, trying to find something, anything that might shed some light here. There were plenty of envelopes with mail addressed to various names, some flyers, a maintenance log, all normal mundane documents offering no clues. Nothing sinister, nothing alarming beyond what I'd seen already. Yet the air around me felt oppressive, charged with this unseen danger. My unease finally compelled me to step back outside, looking around at the shadowy woods, suddenly aware of how isolated I truly was. I quickly shook off the feeling and climbed back into the tow truck, keyed the radio again. "Dispatch, you copy?" Silence. I frowned and checked my connection and repeated myself louder this time. "Dispatch, I've located the vehicle, but something's off. I found blood inside, some other weird stuff too. Can you get law enforcement out here?" Still nothing. As I fiddled with the controls trying to boost the signal, a faint rustling noise came from somewhere near the roadside brush. Instinctively, I turned and stared off into the darkness. My heart seized as a figure emerged, barely visible in the shadows. A pale face, glowing eyes reflecting off my headlights right back at me, locked onto mine. A person now stood there, gaunt, hollow-eyed, and utterly still. Slowly, they lifted an arm and pointed down the road. My breath caught in my throat, tightening up with this sudden primal fear. Who the hell was this? Were they involved somehow? And why were they silently urging me away from the van? I slammed the door's truck shut, my eyes never leaving that figure. I jammed my thumb against the radio button one last time. "Dispatch, god damn it, answer me! I need some backup right now!" The radio hissed to life, but the voice that answered wasn't familiar. It was colder, sharper, edged with confusion.
Who is this? We don't have any active jobs right now,
was all they said. My stomach twisted violently. The shadowy figure stood there motionless, still pointing, this silent sentinel urging me away from whatever I'd stumbled onto. What do you mean no jobs? My voice cracked, panic pushing against my ribs. Sweat formed at my temples despite the chill of the night. I double-checked the radio frequency, glancing nervously back at the brush line. The shadowy figure still stood there, utterly still, glowing eyes still unblinking in the gloom. The dispatcher hesitated, suspicion clear in his voice. I don't know who you spoke to earlier, but our logs are clean. No calls have gone out in the last 2 hours. Are you sure you got the right location, the right channel? Yeah, I'm fucking sure, I snapped back. 40 miles past the pullout on Highway 19, white commercial van. It's here, abandoned, blood inside, and some weirdo standing off on the road. Send somebody, now. This is Mitchell. I work for Fulton Sons. More static, and then finally and reluctantly.
All right, stay put. I'll alert law enforcement. Sit tight. Don't engage with anybody.
I let go of the radio mic and leaned back in my seat, heart thundering, mind racing. The entire scenario reeked of some kind of trouble. Why would dispatch lose a record of my call? And who would direct me here in the first place? Outside, that figure remained perfectly still. The arm had lowered, but those eyes reflecting the light, those twin embers, still staring right at me. It felt like they saw into my very core. Whoever it was clearly wanted me gone and away from the van, and away from whatever nightmare that I'd now stumbled upon. I debated leaving immediately, screw protocol, abandon the call, and just call it a night. But something had kept me frozen there, compelled me to watch, waiting, hoping desperately that law enforcement would roll up at any moment. Minutes crawled by, thick and suffocating as they were. Then, without warning, the figure stepped closer, emerging fully into the harsh beams of my headlights. It was a woman, I realized then, pale skin streaked with grime and blood. Torn clothing, her expression was now vacant yet intensely focused. She raised both hands, slowly palms facing me, a gesture of urgency and surrender all at once. I cracked open my window just enough to shout to her. Who are you? What happened here? She didn't speak, she didn't blink. Instead, she pointed again, incessantly down the road, mouthing a silent, desperate word. Go. A chill shot down my spine. Whatever had happened to her, whatever she witnessed, had now left her speechless, broken, and terrified. Help is coming, I said, but my voice sounded hollow, even to me. She shook her head violently. Her eyes were wild and begging. She was telling me clearly to leave now. It was a warning, a plea. I felt sick, my instincts screaming at me to follow her command, to get as far away from here as possible. And then a different sound had now reached my ears, a low, rumbling hum. Headlights appeared far down the road behind me, coming up fast. My breath caught, adrenaline surged. The approaching vehicle wasn't marked. No emergency lights, no sirens. Just a black sedan racing toward us. The woman glanced back once, panic erupting across her features, and with one final look, she spun and vanished back into the brush, melting off into the darkness. Now that snapped me out of my frozen state, and instinct finally took over. I slammed the truck into gear, wheels spinning, gravel spitting out behind me. I accelerated hard, flying away from the scene, eyes glued to my rearview mirror as the sedan closed in behind me, headlights cutting through the night. I clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles burned white, expecting them to run me down, to try and force me off the road. Instead, after what felt like an eternity, they slowed abruptly near that abandoned van, coming to a halt exactly where I just stood. They didn't chase me or pursue me any further. My breath was ragged, my heart was hammering, and sweat was now cold against my skin. I didn't stop the truck until I saw familiar city lights ahead of me, until I pulled into the well-lit yard, threw open the truck door, and stumbled onto solid ground, shell-shocked completely. Dispatch called out over the radio, confused and angry, but I ignored them, numb to everything except that raw relief. The police ended up investigating the next day, finding, of course, nothing. No van, no bloody clothes, no woman in distress. No record of the call ever existed in the dispatch logs either. It was as if the entire night had just vanished into thin air. Officially, I became a joke. Another night shift burnout seeing things off in the dark. Unofficially though, I know better. Something strange was going on out there, and I should have never been involved. I spent the majority of my life as a military police officer. 2 decades of watching gates, patrolling barracks, breaking up fights, handling high-risk situations without even really blinking. It was a life of hard rules and harder people, and when I finally retired, I told myself I wanted something a little easier. Less shouting, less paperwork, and nobody trying to stab me with a broken pen. That's how I ended up working security at St. Gertrude Medical Center. Easy money, quiet work. Nobody ever really notices the guy in the uniform with the clipboard and the badge, you know? You just float through the night, checking doors, nodding at nurses, and logging rounds like clockwork. I won't lie though, the hours were pretty brutal. 12-hour shifts, mostly overnight, but the job itself was cake. No riots, no bar fights, no kids hopped up on energy drinks trying to play alpha. Just buzzing lights overhead, floors you could eat off of, and the soft shuffle of nurses doing God's work. I was issued a clearance badge that gave me full access, psych ward, surgical units, maternity, even the morgue. Every floor, every wing. It made me the guy responsible for making sure the whole machine stayed locked down after hours. You'd really be surprised about how much a hospital feels like a tomb after midnight. Lights dimmed, elevators slower, no voices except whispers or groans. You walk those halls long enough, you start to memorize the temperature of every room, the sounds the walls would make, the subtle changes in the air pressure when a door opens that shouldn't. So when something's off, you'd know it right away. It started off pretty small, a patient wandering into an empty OR suite, another one found in the sub-basement waiting room with no shoes on, and no idea how they even got there. These weren't simple wanderers either. Most of them were too sick or too far gone to leave their beds without any kind of help, and yet somehow they did. Doors locked from the inside, no logs of any kind of movement, nobody seeing a thing. At first, you just automatically chalk it up. Human error. A nurse left a door open, somebody forgot to update the logs, but it continued to happen, quietly over and over and over. Eventually, I asked myself a darker question. Who the hell is letting these patients out? And more importantly, why? After the 5th time I found a patient where they had no business being, I stopped writing it off as coincidence. The files didn't lie. A man with stage 4 bone cancer had turned up in the ICU break room, curled up in a chair sipping somebody's leftover apple juice. When I asked how he got there, he just smiled and said, "The night doctor helped me walk." There were no nurses on that wing who matched the description that he gave me either. No one even remembered seeing him leave his room. I started pulling badge access logs after every single incident. I'd get into security terminals on floor 1A, scroll through the timestamps, compare movements to the rounds that I'd done. Nothing ever stood out though, not one anomaly. Whatever was happening without a trace. That told me one thing, it had to be internal. Somebody who knew how to move quietly, maybe some of the night nurses or one of the surgeons who'd stayed late and had access. Somebody with a full badge and privileges like mine. It didn't make sense, but it was the only possibility left. I brought it up to my supervisor Clyde, who had all the motivation of a retired DMV clerk. He grunted, glanced over the logs, and told me to just keep my eyes open. That was that. "Old buildings have their quirks," he said. "Patients get confused, just keep them in the rooms." So I started logging my own notes. I timed the doors, measured the interval between routine nurse visits. I left tiny pieces of tape on certain door hinges to track if they opened. I was done playing these games. I wanted to know how someone was getting end-of-life patients out of their beds and into areas that you needed level 3 clearance to access. And then finally, a name showed up. I was skimming a batch of internal maintenance records one night during a lull, and just trying to match names to movements, you know, when I saw this new entry, a badge access used on a restricted pharmacy closet at 3:17 a.m. That wasn't unusual, but what was unusual was the name, Jeremiah Styles. I didn't recognize it. I asked the change nurse about him. "Oh yeah," she said, stirring her coffee. "Janitor, graveyard shift, weird little guy." I asked to see a photo. The idea was grainy, but it matched the image I already had in my head. Tall, narrow shoulders, pale as drywall, with oily black hair and sunken eyes that didn't blink. I have seen him once or twice pushing his cart around the quiet wings. Never even heard him speak though, never once even made eye contact. But that night, I watched him. From my usual perch near the security monitors, I keyed into the hallway cams and followed his route. He moved slowly, like he had all the time in the world. He didn't mob much, mostly just drifted, cart in tow, eyes on the floor. He'd hover near patient doors, linger for a minute too long, and then move on. At 3:08 a.m., he stopped outside room 617. A woman named Agnes, mid-70s, terminal heart failure, couldn't walk without help. Camera footage showed Jeremiah entering the room with a small cup in hand, and he emerged 20 minutes later. No nurse had logged a visit during that time. The next night, I posted up near the north wing where Agnes had been moved for observation. Sure enough, I see him again, same pattern. Walks in with a cup, came out without it. Minutes later, Agnes rang her bedside bell and asked to be moved. She insisted the new doctor told her it was time. The nurses dismissed it, blamed her confusion on meds, but I didn't. 3 nights later, I got the confirmation that I needed. I followed him in person. I waited until his cart creaked down the hallway past psych recovery. He stopped at room 403. I followed at a distance, flashlight off, radio silent. Jeremiah goes inside. I wait 60 seconds, then peer into the window. I didn't expect what I found though. Inside, this frail woman stood beside her TV, IV still dangling from her arm. She was swaying gently, glassy-eyed, like she'd been waiting for a ride home. Jeremiah was knelt in front of her, tying her shoes. Her feet were bloated, discolored, but she smiled like a kid going to church. "You're doing great," he said, voice calm and soft. "Just a little walk tonight, change of scenery." "Are you my son?" she asked him. No, he said. "I'm just filling in." "All right, this way." Then he took her hand and led her into the hallway. I followed. They walked slowly, down 3 turns, bypassing 2 security doors that he shouldn't have had access to, except he did. His badge swiped at every one, no hesitation. We ended up near the old maintenance wing. Most of it had been sealed off for years. He stopped at this unmarked gray door and unlocked it. I moved quickly and caught the door before it latched shut and then slipped in behind them. The room was strange. It was super clean, bleached linoleum floor, an ancient speaker sitting on a supply shelf, a low hum of music playing, something orchestral, slow and sweet. And there they were, dancing. No jokes, no weirdness, just Jeremiah holding the woman like she was made of glass, slowly swaying to the music under the flickering ceiling lights. She was smiling and he was too. It wasn't romantic, it was something else, like watching a child and his dying grandmother cling to the very last quiet moment they had together. But this wasn't caregiving, and it wasn't protocol, and it damn sure wasn't right. I stepped forward and said, "Jeremiah?" He froze, his eyes found mine, black and empty, and suddenly full of grief. "She's going soon," he whispered. "She just wanted one last dance." I stood there stunned for a second, not sure whether to call for backup or let it play out. The woman didn't even seem to notice me. Her eyes were closed, head on his shoulder, a faint smile on her lips like she was dreaming. Jeremiah's hands were now trembling where they held her, and for a moment, he looked like a scared little boy. "This isn't your job," I said. "I know," he whispered, not turning to face me. "But nobody ever tells them it's okay to go. They just leave them here, alone. I don't like that." I stepped forward slowly. "You drugged her." "I didn't hurt her," he snapped, then instantly softened up again. "I gave her something to keep her calm. I tell them what they need to hear, that somebody cares, that they're not alone. She gave this soft laugh, eyes still shut. He said we were going to go to the garden. That's when I moved. I put a hand on Jeremiah's shoulder firmly. He didn't resist, just nodded and let go of her. She stumbled slightly, but stayed standing. She needs to be in her bed, I said, and you need to come with me. He finally turned to face me. I expected madness, defiance, maybe tears, but what I got was emptiness, hollow eyes, resignation. I never touched them, he said. I just made it nicer. We walked out together. I flagged a nurse and had them bring the woman back to her room. She didn't argue. She'd already started to nod off again. Whatever he gave her, it was definitely strong, but she was stable, no harm done, at least not physically. I escorted Jeremiah down to administration and filed the report. HR was called in, security, the whole 9 yards. They searched his locker, found an entire stack of patient names, scribbled in loops on lined yellow pads. Terminal cases, DNRs, psych flags, all the ones who'd slipped the cracks. He also had this stack of Polaroids, very inappropriate photos that he'd taken of patients. He was fired before sunrise. Officially, the charges were trespassing and unauthorized contact with patients, but after the paperwork was done and I gave them my full statement, I asked somebody from legal what the hospital's plan was long term. Keep it quiet, she said. No press, no drama, just a bad hire. It's already handled. But that didn't sit right with me because the truth is, nobody knew how long he'd been doing it for. Some records didn't line up, some badges had logs retroactively deleted. We were never able to prove if he was doing it or if somebody had helped cover it up. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody higher up knew and just looked the other way. Weeks went by and things would slowly go back to normal, mostly. I stopped seeing patients in the wrong places, the logs continued to make sense again, and the halls felt quieter. But I'll admit there were nights deep into the shift when I patrolled those older wings, the ones with the creaky vents and lights that flicker just a little too long. And I'd swear that I hear music. Just a faint melody, a violin or a piano, something soft and slow drifting out of a supply closet or under a door that shouldn't be unlocked. Of course I'd check, always did, but never found anything. Just met with silence, my own footsteps echoing in those empty halls. Was he crazy? Probably, but maybe not in the way that we think of crazy. Maybe he was just lonely. Maybe he saw what this place does to people, the way it erases them before they're even gone. And maybe he did in fact think he was helping. I don't want to really justify what he did. He definitely crossed way too many lines, violated all kinds of protocols, but when I think back to that old woman smiling in the dim light, swaying to a song that she hadn't heard in years, I think part of me understood. Jeremiah said something when they took him off in cuffs too, something that I never wrote in my report. He looked at me, dead in the eyes, and said, "You should see how long they hold on when somebody finally tells them it's okay to go. I give these people life. I'm a life giver." Yeah, okay, buddy.